consensus? Not permitted, not permitted.
For,
Okay.
for both of those entities, the contractor office with equipment and contractor, yeah. No, I mean, like, like a backhoe or whatever it is, a trailer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not permitted, all right. Consent. Good? Okay.
Okay.
No on both?
Now, we would open up to trustees that have an issue with any of the lines that
We-
have permissions or special uses.
And then tell us which topic it is so we can put it on the screen for the public.
So where are you, on 6 still?
Yes.
Okay.
The use table.
Mm-hmm. All right. Janet, go ahead.
Okay, I have proposed a series of changes to sections 7.1, 7.2, 8.1, and 8.4. I grouped them together because they're all various different use aspects. But they,
They're, for
and-
you folks, they're on the.
so they are on the handout that says proposed amendment number 3, the zoning ordinance.
Name those again, starting out with 7.2?
7.1,
7.1?
7.2, 8.1, and 8.4. So referring to the document that I handed out to everyone, in Table 7.1, we have a variety of uses, right? And so one of the ones that we've got some that we've excluded here. So not sure why we're excluding cannabis dispensaries in 2024. I'm also unsure about why we would not allow a pharmacy or a drugstore in an RD, in a retail district. And I think Jim Brown had also brought up at a previous meeting that there appeared to be a restriction against tobacconists that was possibly confused with hookah parlors and vaping places and so forth, which is not something that we're interested, but I don't know if there's any reason why if someone was selling pipe tobacco or something here in Campton Hills that we would want to restrict that. So those were the ones under first group under 7.1.
Would trustee Burson allow us to go through these step by step? It might be easier to
Yeah,
get
I
consensus.
think that
Well,
is
we can certainly
better.
go through that first group. Why don't we
Yeah.
start there? Yeah.
So-
So I have a comment first. RD stands for Research and Development District, not Retail District. So first of all, allowing a pharmacy or drugstore in the Research and Development District just isn't consistent. It's already in the Commercial District, which is where retail would be. The cannabis business, I don't know if we had a referendum that voted that down. I believe we did. I don't know if we
we
have
did
to have
not.
one legally to vote it up. Again, I recall the
We
community
didn't, and
was
we don't
against-
need to.
Thank you, trustee Burson. I don't know that it's, I mean, if the board wants to take this on now and decide if we want to have cannabis dispensaries, I guess that's what you're suggesting, trustee Burson. I think that's,
I'm suggesting there isn't
No.
any reason to
No.
restrict it.
that's your opinion. Yes, I
Let's take
understand
a
that.
consensus on that. Go ahead. Do you want to speak, Tom?
Did you guys were telling me, well, once again, did the board pass something against it? I mean, you're acting like there was something against it before.
The board did not
The
approve
pre-
it in the past. Okay, and it was based on referendum.
Well, and most communities a few years back, when it became legal in the state of Illinois, communities did take some by just a board vote, or they did do non-binding referendums on that issue. I do not know if there was an actual referendum here. I think it was
My understanding was there was an ordinance that specifically said it would not be permitted, and then adding it to the zoning ordinance.
But there was not a referendum. That was on gaming.
No, it was on cannabis, my recollection, I could be wrong.
I think it was
I
just a
believe you're
vote of the
incorrect.
board at the time, probably.
Yeah, I mean, the zoning ordinance specifically says that it's not allowed, which would obviously prevent it. And when it did become legal, first at a medical standpoint, and then from a recreational standpoint, if it wasn't in the zoning ordinance, then the understanding that it could be an interpretation that it could be permitted or allowed. So if communities wanted it, if the community did
Yeah,
want
I
to
don't know if
prohibit
we
it,
need
then
it, yeah.
they would obviously pass an ordinance specifically stating that it would not be allowed, and then would amend the zoning ordinance.
So let's tackle the cannabis first. And with cannabis, I would include a smoke shop. So we'll take a consensus on that.
They're not the same.
As a permitted use?
No,
A smoke
as a
shop and-
no
A
use.
s- a s-
No,
A smoke shop and cannabis dispensary are not the same thing.
but
Separate them, I think, Bob.
keep them separate?
Yeah.
Well, they're under 7.1. Okay,
But I think the
Mhm.
of cannabis is.
They're separate lines, though,
okay. So cannabis consensus.
as a dispensary.
To
Add-
add it back in as a permitted use.
No, Yes.
Does anybody want to add it back? There's one person
Mhm.
that's proposing to add it. Is there a second, third, and fourth?
We're just bringing this up for the first time. I'm kind of processing. I'm trying to figure out what the negative is on it. Like, why was it not permitted? Is there an argument to not have a cannabis dispensary? I mean, what is the argument against it? I mean, other cities aren't having trouble with them. I haven't noticed, like, anything in the news negative about having them. I'm trying to figure out what it is.
You know, I guess my only argument, if I could have one against it, is there's a million. I mean, I know there's that, like, gas stations are the same way, okay? And we do restrict how many commercial things are done here. So I kind of look at it like, why? I mean, I can drive, I mean, there's a new one opening up every week in every town. I can drive a mile to get to one? Do I need another one? I don't know. I don't think there needs to be as many of those as there is gas stations. So I wonder if I really care enough to have it here. But that would be my only argument against it, I guess.
I would just say the same thing about liquor stores. I mean, now we have several
Right.
different venues to buy liquor. I don't see what the argument is against it, and I would like to hear that. It's pretty quick discussion.
well, we just need a consensus on cannabis. Who's in favor, who's not in favor? Consensus?
Who wants to add
Mhm.
legally putting cannabis in a zoning district?
I do.
Ed and Jim, Jim, no. Ed? No. And then Janet?
I was a yes.
So the noes have it. Or Mike?
Yeah. Mike, are you still, do you want to add, do you want to allow cannabis to be a permitted use?
Would it still require special use?
We haven't decided that. It could be a special use. Would you
I would-
vote
I
yes
would
if it
say-
was a special use?
I would allow it as a special use, yes, but not by right.
I don't have a choice.
Well,
Yeah,
he's
I
making a
accept that.
third option.
Well, guess what? I like it that way. By special use, I think, I mean, would they have to ask?
In which, in the commercial districts 1 and 2?
Yes. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's like we talked about in the past, when we talked
Because you
about
can
the
put
other-
restrictions and conditions in a special use,
Right, yeah, exactly.
in C1 and C2.
Yes, you want to see too, yep.
So if it is allowed, I'm not sure that I know of a community that has it as a permitted use. Typically, any of the cannabis business establishments, whether they're growers, transporters, dispensaries, they're all special use.
Yes.
They're all limited to specific districts. And yes, one of the steps would be to include it in the use matrix, but there would also be significant amount of text that would have to go into the zoning ordinance as well, relating to the restrictions in the special use process. So they're mostly pretty standard, but some communities do change them. So it wouldn't just be as simple as putting just the, S in the use matrix.
But we could bring those for next Tuesday if you decide to put it in there.
Or at another time. That's-
Is there, I guess you need to take a consensus
On special
for
use.
special use in the C1, C2? Or do you just want it in one, not the other?
So we'll
I'm
go
going to say special use.
Yes.
special
I'm
use.
still a no.
You're still a no?
I don't know.
You're a no. So we have 2 yeses, 2 nos, and then
And Mike was a special use, yes.
special use, yes. And Janet was a
Oh, yes.
yes.
So there's 3 yeses,
Mhm.
or no, 4 yeses. 4 yeses for special use.
Okay.
And you don't have to vote because there's already 4. All right, so Carmen will bring us language that he will largely adopt from a very
I mean,
A client that's already done this.
I will give it some significant thought and work. I can't guarantee that I can have language by tomorrow for an agenda deadline for Tuesday. It's a very significant
But
change
it'll
in the
be,
zoning
it is,
code.
but it'll
So,
be for
yeah.
Tuesday night, you can have it.
I can work with Jim, but that's, again,
Sitting there going,
this isn't as simple as just changing a setback. So this is something very,
Yeah.
very significant,
yeah.
so.
And,
All right.
Well, in 7.1 is also tobacconist, which is a smoke shop. Do we want to talk about that?
Again, it's
or
not a smoke shop, it's someone selling tobacco.
Somebody selling tobacco?
yeah, I have, if I may, so I have highlighted, there's, again, two categories here. We broke this out. There's the highlighted in yellow up there, smoking, hookah, or vaping lounge. And then there's the tobacconist. The tobacco is just strictly retail products. So cigarette lighters, cigars, cigarettes. We sell tobacco in town. If you walk into the Shell gas station, one
Yeah, the
entire wall
gas
is nothing but
station.
cigarettes. So it's a source of retail. It would be allowed in our 2 retail districts. Specifically excludes, that definition specifically excludes smoking on the premises. Smoking, inhaling, language is pretty tight there. But the other kind of smoking lounge is prohibited across the board.
Okay. Ed?
Question on the definition, just to be clear. I know the use of tobacco on the premises is not, according to Mr. Brown, not allowed in a tobacconist, but a tobacconist is any type of tobacco, whether it's, pipe tobacco in a bag, or it's cigarettes, or it's cigars, or it's vaping. I mean, it could be just a vaping store, correct?
I believe that's
Not
true.
with use on site, but just selling vaping materials and
Oh,
glass
because they sell
paraphernalia, lighters,
vaping
whatever.
materials at gas stations.
But vape, I understood, but for a tobacconist, I just want to make sure I understand the definition.
Yeah.
It could just be a vape store, it could just be a high-class or high-end cigar store, or it could be all of the above. Is that correct?
Let me take a look,
Okay.
because I think there is language that would prohibit some of the items you're suggesting.
Yeah, I thought they didn't want a pure vaping store when they discussed it at the zoning commission.
alphabet, it would go quicker. Hang on, I'll throw it up on the board here, S. 139. Thanks, I'm almost there. So, yeah, an establishment for the retail sale of tobacco.
And related products.
And related products. Well, it'd have to be like a cigarette lighter or a cigar or the tobacco product.
Vaping is not a tobacco product.
I don't think so, no.
I think that was what they defined. A vaping is not a tobacco product. It's a substitute for that product in usual parlance. So that's why the vaping store, they said they wouldn't be
I'm with you
saying
on
yes
this
to.
one.
I'd be more comfortable if we were to add something to clarify that this does not include, establishes primarily for however you technically call vaping stores. I prefer that we not just have vaping stores. The other ones, if it's all inclusive, whatever, I mean, it's a retail establishment, that's fine.
President
So
Warnicki?
put that as a special use as well? Ed? is
Well, I
that-
think
No.
trustee Burson may have an idea too.
I agree with trustee Muncy about the concern about what tobacconist might be defined as. Could it be as simple as just removing "and related products"? I don't think we need to reference the fact that they might be selling lighters or something. That's generally allowed in retail anyway. So can't we just say tobacco products? Or
Jim?
I think
Yeah,
though, the-
yeah.
the issue is the vaping is not generally viewed as it's a substitute for a tobacco. It's not tobacco. They're not burning tobacco in a vape.
Do you feel that, Mr. Brown, you feel you could enforce that the way it's written now? Because I don't understand.
Right, so
what
I'm
vaping
looking,
is,
I'm
so-
looking now at the definition for smoking hookah or vaping lounge, so it'd have to be similar language, only prohibiting it. So hookah lounge, for example, would be an establishment for smoking. Smoke or smoking means inhaling or exhaling the fumes, and this is the part we'd have to somehow mimic or change, of any organic or synthetic material, including but not limited to plants, herbs. We'd obviously allow tobacco because it's tobacconist. So it'd be something like that, that would not include that, some other type of product other than tobacco. But that'd just be one or two sentences added on to the tobacco.
I don't want to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
No
lack
pun
of a better
intended.
term.
No, but if you want to,
Yeah,
if you
pardon the
want to
pun,
specifically
but-
allow
but
vaping,
I-
you should say it.
My personal preference would be to have language in there to specifically exclude vaping.
Sure,
Yes.
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
All right, so that covers tobacconist. Did we cover that section then?
Yeah, that.
Because the
7
pharmacy,
did you have
drugstore
7
would be
too?
in C1
So,
and C2.
continuing down in that section, and accepting trustee Muncie's correction on the RD district through the entire column.
Wait, where are you now?
I am still in section 7.1, a little further down on the table. We're at massage therapy establishments, personal service establishments, and physical therapy establishments. We seem to have excluded these, I'm not sure why. And when we say, for example, a physical therapy establishment, do we mean a place that only does physical therapy, or do we mean one of the many businesses that we already have in the village that happen to provide physical therapy as part of their medical services? So I would suggest that we allow massage therapy, personal services, and which would be spa services and things like this, and physical therapy services in C1 and C2 districts.
And Jim, did they say they were going to allow that as part of a medical health facility? Did they
Yeah, I
not?
think, I'm trying to figure out where this is now, but I think we did acknowledge that they exist here in the village presently, and that they should be allowed it, and I can't find it off the top of my head, but, if they were licensed
But
by
if-
the state to,
But, physical therapists are doctors of physical therapy these days.
Right.
If one of them wants to open a physical therapy-only establishment, they should be able to do that without being under the aegis of a chiropractor or something. Just as a licensed massage therapist should be able to open an office to do that. They're licensed by the state to do it.
Yeah, I kind of remember the zoning commission wanting to say yes to those.
They're
I do
allowed in the
too.
matrix, it's just that they're
Yeah.
a C, they're conditional they're allowed in all the commercial districts, these three uses. But for some reason, massage therapy is a conditional and physical therapy is a conditional, but I can't find what the condition is.
So-
I couldn't either.
So did we just change those in the chart to be a P, as you're suggesting, to cover that, Jim Brown?
right, but
Yeah.
I think they would already be covered. There's three definitions: physical therapist, physical therapy center, and then defining physical therapy. The physical therapy definition comes from state statute,
Yep.
I believe.
So they didn't want to restrict it.
Right, so as long as they have first of all, if it's something that's supposed to be licensed by the state, and they hold that license, then
That's
it
right.
would be allowed.
So would we just change and edit this back to put P in the C1 and C2 for those three items in that use table?
I would hope
Is there a consensus to do that?
I would say
I,
yes.
everybody's nodding their head, so
Yeah.
that, we'll just put it down as a
Okay.
scrivener's
Is it P?
error. Yep.
Okay, moving along,
Jim,
it's 7.2.
All right, all right, continuing on,
If I could just for 1 second,
Yeah.
Jim, if I recall correctly, that there was discussion about the potential nuisance aspects to massage therapy establishments. And then a lot of communities, there are, let's say, strict licensing guidelines,
What-
background checks.
what would those nuisance aspects be? I'm a licensed
Typically,
massage
they'll-
therapist, and I find this entire notion
I think-
personally and professionally offensive.
But I think Carmen's got the floor right now.
And my experience in the subject relates to typically standalone establishments of more of a transient nature, and with the, perceived or often experienced interrelation with human trafficking.
I'm aware of that, and having operated in another suburb that decided that they needed to regulate this heavily in a way that I don't think that we would typically want to do, that included very scary posters that the proprietor was required to display, warning all the clients that this site may be involved in human trafficking, and requiring, as you say, background checks on all of the employees and so forth, was a slap in the face and an obstacle to all the legitimate operators, and the illegitimate operators were easy to see and easy to shut down and didn't require any of this. It was very simple to walk, for anyone enforcing ordinances to walk into one of these locations and tell what was going on. So I think that the notion that massage therapy is more associated with human trafficking than countless other occupations is ill-informed.
No, and I understand that. I don't think I made a statement that all massage therapy is attributed to human trafficking. I mean, in my career, I've participated in several adjudications, several law enforcement actions that resulted in penalties against massage therapists related to criminal violations. So in the communities that and we had this discussion at the zoning commission as well, if this use was going to be allowed in specific districts, specifically delineated in the zoning ordinance, my recommendation is that you have a framework in the village code to address it. And those that are going to comply will comply. But to not have any framework at all, no license, and it would be difficult to enforce against bad actors.
Well, did we hear that the definitions provide that framework? That the definitions of massage therapists require the license, that the definition of physical therapist is based on some state of Illinois definition? That's was
correct.
my understanding. If that's the case and we have that framework, great. If not, then I would say, yes, maybe we need to put something else in there, either in the definitions or somewhere else.
Sure, but, and I agree, it's just that the village does not have business licenses for that type of establishment, I don't believe, or for many, if any at all.
We don't have any,
And,
and we should have them.
right.
Well, we don't.
Yeah, I know.
Right, so that, and in some communities, they adopt the state regulations, and they just require proof that the state regulations have been met in the licensing. It's just, you don't have anything in your code. The word massage, and I think I pointed this out at the zoning commission, it's not even in the village code. So it can be perceived that it certainly is a permitted use, and that there are no restrictions on it whatsoever, so.
I guess you could put it as a special use like Mike did on the cannabis, and then you'd cover yourself with restrictions and regulate it in some fashion as a special use.
It's very common that it's a special use. in
And that way
cannabis.
you put conditions on the owner to follow A, B, C, and D,
Right.
and it doesn't become human trafficking. Because strip malls up and down major highways in the region are notorious for this, and as quick as you shut one down, three open. I know what Carmen's talking about in other communities I've worked in.
Go ahead, Tim.
I think what we're trying to talk about, I mean, right now, there's massages going on. Some ladies doing massages in her basement, or a man. I go to somebody in South Elgin that does it. I mean, it's above board, it's, so part of me is like, I don't want to have it where we just all of a sudden make them illegal overnight, and we're like, oh, by the way, go find somewhere else to go give massages, you know what I mean? But I also, too, get the idea that, they have potential of being a problem. So is there a way we can kind of come in between where
Special
The
use.
special use, where would they have
I
to
agree.
ask? In other words, if they're currently doing it, we pass this, how would they get legal, I guess you'd want to call it?
Whatever
To be
conditions you put on it
Yeah.
when they go before the planning and zoning commission.
Well, Even
It
Oak
could
Park
be a
didn't
lot or a
require
little.
special use. Even Oak Park didn't require special use.
Even. All right, what's the consensus?
Based on the attorney's recommendations, I would agree with special use.
Okay. Everybody agree? All right, special use.
So I have a couple more here that I think we can go through quickly.
Oh, yeah, you had 7-2, I think.
We're still on 7-1, regrettably, towards the bottom of it. Energy systems, principal use. I'm suggesting special use in FFB and OSP districts. Power generation on these larger, parcels is possible, very possibly desirable, but the community has an interest in deciding where and when it wants solar farms and windmills and
That
such
makes
things.
sense.
So I know that there was some discussion of power generation on some open space. I don't know if anything's ever happened with that, but we don't even allow it in the matrix, so it seemed that a special use would be
Okay,
appropriate.
special use for,
Hey, Jim, it does say special use
Yep.
already, doesn't it?
Oh, was it added back?
Yeah, so under energy systems, principal use, it
Okay.
is a special use in 3 of the zoning districts.
All
I
right.
missed that
And the
in the recent.
definition includes power generating.
Right, apologies, I missed that in the
systems.
recent revision.
But it doesn't say solar, that's where it's rolled
It
up.
doesn't say solar, but generically of power, it gets special use.
So for like wind, geothermal,
And- And
whatever.
On the next line, I have a question for our attorney, if I may. The line that says utilities with special use all the way across. In section 5.4 says that utilities are exempt from the zoning ordinance. So are they exempt, or do they require special use?
I don't think we have a choice.
I think it depends on what specifically, how they're defined in the code. I see where you're
Well,
going
let's,
with 5.4, right?
let's think about an unambiguously defined utility like the power company. Because I know communications, there's some ambiguity. So we're talking,
Page 29, Jim.
I can't have the whole ordinance on because it's too big and then it just doesn't move. So what chapter is that we're talking
So
about?
we are in
section-
7.1.
5.4. 5.4 is the definition.
Which is Article
5.4.
One more, Jim. There you go.
So it reads utilities, Jim, under the table, but, and trustee Burson's correct, 5.4 talks about public utilities.
Public
So I
utility.
can't recall why utilities was included there. I know there are other, I mean, even in 5.4, it talks about things that are exempt from.
Well, a wireless
this exemption.
telecommunications carrier is not considered a utility in
Right.
section 5.4, for example.
Right, or I think it talks about solar energy systems, wind energy systems. I just can't recall what the table's referring to as far as utilities in 7.1.
Well, I guess I just would like to understand, are the utilities exempt from our zoning regulation or not? Because if they.
Well, and to add clarity, I think that the reason it's special, because the utilities section right there clearly says the power generating utilities that we traditionally think are exempt. But we wanted to put it as special use because there are ways that villages have found to regulate on, if you had streetlights, for example,
So are,
that you would not allow a carrier to just be able to go on a ComEd streetlight provided, or as a right without a special use, because they have these small units that were being attached across residential communities in Chicagoland for, what do they call them, to replace the big antenna farms.
Right,
to-
so-
they're microcells.
They're microcells,
I-
and,
I have the
and,
answer.
and
You
the-
have-
and to
I think-
create
I
the
think
special
Jim has an
use
answer.
was the reason we put it there, to
I think Jim
to
has the
regulate
answer
it.
as to
Yeah, so,
what it
Jim's
so
means.
got
what
it.
5.4 says is, the following utility uses are exempt from the ordinance, and it lists wires, cables, conduits, vaults, laterals, these are things that go underground. That's exempt. They're normally in the right-of-way, it doesn't have to be, so that's exempt. We aren't regulating a conduit that goes underground. If a utility company came in and they wanted to establish a building or a
Right.
tower, something above ground, that would not be exempt. Okay, so
maybe
the
the
list of
Well, it does-
exemptions is very specific.
Well, it doesn't say that, though. The hydrant is above ground.
Oh, okay, so
Right.
hydrant,
You know,
hydrant,
you know,
a water main.
Wires and cables might. So I'm not arguing about it, I just like to understand whether, is it exempt under 5.4 because we've decided that it's exempt? Is it exempt because state statute requires us to exempt it?
State statute.
So if state statute requires us to exempt it, are we allowed to have these special use requirements.
Well, to a certain extent, they are exempt, but not every single piece of property that a utility owns. So, I mean, if ComEd came and wanted to build a 2,000
A
square
storage yard.
foot warehouse, on the
Or
north side
a
of
generating
38.
facility.
Well, I mean, it would depend. I mean, they'd still be subject to certain provisions in our zoning code with regard to where they're locating and the way that they're constructing their facilities. But when I say facilities, let's say they're structures, they're buildings. But as 5.4 indicates, right, wires, conduits, cables, things like that, not subject to their zoning.
What if a major power company wanted to build transmission lines across our town? Would we have any recourse?
That-
No, you have no recourse.
Yeah, based on regulations, no, to a certain extent.
So what we settled on here is to put the special use, so if it wasn't a state mandate or federal mandate, we would take some action to try to regulate what we could regulate. But if they're exempt, they're gonna tell us they're exempt and send a strongly worded letter to us, and
Maybe some clarification,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it says utilities.
Yeah.
And that could be read in conflict with 5.4. So maybe there's some clarification that could be made on either the matrix or in 5.4 that indicates what would not be exempt. You know, And then that would be a special use, if not exempt. something to that.
Thank you. I don't think it
Yeah.
requires clarification in the ordinance, but thank you for explaining.
Okay, let's move
Jim will
on.
work on that, on the definition of 5.4, so we're clear, but
So you would like to move on to 7.2?
7.2?
Yes. This is the limitation on short-term rentals, services such as Airbnb.
Mhm. Either it's a primary.
Um,
I'm sorry, 5 point.
This is section 7.2N, short-term rentals. I added this clause, including services such as Airbnb, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the board what we would, whether we feel it was okay as it was, or whether we feel it requires additional clarification, because I think short-term rental is a pretty broad phrase.
I agree with trustee Burson. I think the additional clarification, whether we mention a brand name like Airbnb or not, I think it's probably a good idea. That's one of the people I'm most familiar with. I like the additional clarification.
the
Okay,
consensus
let's-
to add belt and suspenders more clearly say we don't want.
Okay, good,
We'll add
wow.
Maybe including but not limited to, because, I mean,
Yeah.
most people know of
Okay.
Airbnb and VRBO or Verbo, but there are other ones, so.
But
Okay.
not limited to, but the lawyer's language.
So on the backside of this page, we've already covered ADUs, so we're down to 8.4.
What number?
8.4.
8.4.
And there's not really anything on A, so we're down to B, limitations on home-based businesses, no toxic, explosive, flammable, combustible, corrosive, et cetera, substances. I mean, it sounds reasonable, except that everybody already has those in their house. So I'm not sure why, we've added that in as a limitation on home-based businesses. We're certainly not going to attempt to police or enforce it. And I don't generally think we should be putting things in an ordinance that we're not going to attempt to enforce.
Just to clarify, section 8.6 is home-based businesses, page 54. Is that correct, Janet?
No, 8.4, home-based businesses.
Did I,
A,
I think it's on page 56, isn't it?
do I have the paragraph wrong?
No.
Yeah, I've got 54, B3, sections 8.6. This was the most recent one printed out for me.
Okay, my error.
To B, may I speak to that real quickly? The thing that you say everybody violates, why can't we just add in there, beyond types and quantities typical for residential use? If you've got 2 bags of fertilizer for your lawn, I don't care. If you've got 120 bags of fertilizer, I might be a little more concerned.
For multiple reasons.
okay, consensus, good?
Keep the language if we put beyond standard residential use.
Yeah, beyond types and quantities typical for
Good,
residential use.
everybody, yes? Yes, yes, okay.
Except for maybe radioactive. I don't know if people keep radioactive.
Well, it's in your
That's
smoke
for-
detectors.
That would be a zero, except for your
We
smoke
hope-
detector,
Yeah.
then, yeah.
I agree. Yeah. All right, what's your next number? Is there one?
Home-based.
Apparently 86E, where we're back to massage therapy, personal care, and mental health.
Did we cover A, though? Trustee
No, I
Morrison?
kind of skipped it because it was only a one-word change, and I already got talked out of it by the Administrator Rooney.
It's a good reason.
So I would jump down to E, the end of this page. We're home-based businesses, permitted home businesses, and I'm suggesting that we add massage therapy and personal care services as allowed home businesses, along with mental health, which I believe Mr. Brown had already
This must be-
restored for us, is that
Is that what
correct?
she's talking
Yeah.
about?
I don't think I put it in. I
There
would
was
say.
a conversation
that-
about
that
it, seemed
Probably
about
would fall
a
under.
meeting or two ago, I thought that it was going to get added back in.
Yeah, I mean, that would fall under
Here,
professional
here,
services.
here,
Yeah.
Under E.
Mental health is
That's it.
a professional service,
Yeah.
so it's
I mean,
okay.
I-
That's,
Okay,
would be
so
that's
okay.
good.
All right,
Yeah, I
then
think-
then I'm okay
I
with
think
that.
all three, 8, 9, and 10, is everybody good?